What's up, guys? I'm currently traveling for work, and I thought I'd share with you a video from my other channel, Rec Sport Education, which focuses a lot on nutrition, health, fitness, and stuff like that. But this video is significant because it covers not only some of the history of nutrition in America and the health problems associated with it, but also the lesser-known impact of religion. One religion in particular, the Seventh-day Adventists, and their effect on American health and diet. Stick around for this one because I guarantee most of the information in this video you've probably never heard of. And on a quick aside, you might want to check out my book, The Saints Who Built America: How Sacred Foundations Shaped 200 Years of U.S. History, linked down in the description. Let's get into it.
There's been a lot of talk about health changes in the United States recently. RFK Jr. has been declared the new Director of Health and Human Services, and that's great. I don't like his politics very much. On the other hand, I don't need to. As long as he does a good job, I'm happy, right? So we can all root for somebody like RFK to do a good job. We all want better health in our lives. One of the big things that's come out recently, and something that a lot of health professionals and doctors have been excited about and posting video content about, is the fact that red dye number 3, a coal tar product, has been banned in the United States. And some of these even point out that this particular dye was originally banned in the 1980s from cosmetics. And so for at least the last 40 years, we've known that this dye is not good even to put on your skin, yet we've been ingesting it all this time. But, I'll tell you, I'm frustrated because that's not even the full story either. And this latest development is really just the continuation of a very long, half a century old issue that hasn't really solved much. In fact, red dye number 3 was not banned just recently, and it wasn't banned in the 1980s for the first time either. In fact, it was the Food and Drug Act of 1957 that originally banned it. And yet, all this time, we've been ingesting it and using it. It's just a part of the story, a part of the history that a lot of people don't know anymore. And this tends to be one of the major issues within our health industry. It's a tip of the iceberg, but it's an excellent case study in how the health problems that we face today came to be. You see, we knew that red dye 3 was bad all along. It took until 1957 for it to finally be banned, but it was actually kept in circulation because of lobbyists from the food industry, particularly from the maraschino cherry facility. Yeah, maraschino cherries, that fake cherry that I like to call a chemical soup, a Frankenstein of its formal self. It really shouldn't be classified as food, and it shouldn't be anywhere near your food. And this is actually one of my biggest complaints on companies like even Chick-fil-A. I tend to like them otherwise, but they keep putting those little cherries in their products on top of their milkshakes and such. Well, all this time to get that bright red color, they used red dye number 3. Now, of course, I believe they're using red dye 40, which has its own problems. But you see, the cherry industry represented a significant portion of the economy, and so they lobbied the government to give them a reprieve for a time period so they could find an alternative. They were granted that reprieve, and then, of course, the cherry industry had no incentive whatsoever to actually find an alternative. And so we've been using it all this time. And like I said, isn't that just a perfect case study of our health system today and why we have chronic diseases in the United States? We call it the American epidemic, and it's classified with 4 key conditions that affect so much of our society. These, of course, include conditions such as diabetes, cancer, dementia, and at the top of that list is heart disease. Now, if we take this time to focus on heart disease particularly, and we look into it, we'll actually find that it became a major problem in the United States, or was officially recognized as a problem in the United States, in around 1950. And so, of course, around that same time, you get a number of health professionals, doctors, and researchers and such, who begin making observations and trying to address this problem. And one of those major influencers was Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys did some good things. He was responsible for creating K rations for World War II soldiers. This is basically the precursor to the MRE. And we thank him for feeding our soldiers, for sure. However, by the 1950s and through the 1960s, Ansel Keys made observations and did barely any science to come up with some guidelines that began to be popular in America. For example, he observed that heart disease seems to be correlated with cholesterol. Now, of course, there's other factors too: lack of sleep, a sedentary lifestyle, junk food and sugars, as well as stress hormones like cortisol. These are all contributing factors. But in the 1950s, for Ansel Keys, it was cholesterol. And this came from fatty products like meat, dairy. So as the American population started taking this to heart, food companies responded in kind. They started pulling fat out of milk. So you get low-fat milk, skim milk, low-fat butter. They even began replacing basic animal products with vegetable oils and seed oils, which created its own massive problems when we discovered trans fats and their effect on heart health, as well as other oxidative stressors. But additionally, there's something else that Ansel Keys was missing. The fact that this started in 1950s was something not to be ignored. But what he didn't understand, and in fairness, what no one understood at the time, is that there were these other factors affecting the body. So now let me take you back a couple decades earlier to 1927 and the creation of broad-spectrum antibiotics. These began being used in the United States in 1937, a decade later, and they were also used heavily during World War II. After World War II, they became mainstream uses in America. And after World War II, we get 1950 and this new epidemic of heart disease. So what was Keys missing? Well, as we know today, antibiotics kill everything, including the healthy biome in your digestive system. Well, you need a healthy digestion system in order to process fats and basically all animal products. These, of course, we know today are responsible for all kinds of things. There are many people who are cured from depression, for example, by fixing their gut health, getting the right microbes in the body. And of course, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of these healthy microbes. They all do different things, and they're all important in their own way, and they all have to be replaced for your body to function optimally. And among some of their functions is the operation of the liver and bile salts. Bile, of course, is what your body uses to break down fats. And if your gut isn't healthy, then your liver probably isn't going to be very healthy, and your bile salts aren't going to be functioning properly. You're not going to be able to process these fats, and it's going to lead to buildup in the arteries. And that, of course, leads to heart attacks and strokes and a bunch of other conditions. Now, there have also been other unforeseen effects of this oversight. Two of the other major conditions in the United States are dementia and a fertility crisis, where America's fertility rates have gone down, decreased significantly since 1960. We've been pulling out cholesterol from our diets and even medicating people with high cholesterol conditions, reducing their overall cholesterol, even their healthy cholesterol, with things like statins, which aren't good for you at all. And what do we get? Well, a proliferation of dementia, which is the reduction of your brain. Your brain is mostly made of cholesterol, and a reduction in fertility. And your body needs cholesterol to make hormones, including testosterone, which affects fertility rates. Now, of course, this is just one of the many conditions facing America. And this is one example of how we got to where we are, this mess of interpretation, of observation, and a lack of real science. And the fact that it hasn't been properly looked into and further researched in the last 80 years, yeah, it's a problem. And there's probably no quick fix to it. I don't think RFK Jr. can do anything particular that's going to change this situation. Maybe we can at least change the things that are obvious and in front of us today that we know are problems, and that will help overall in substantial ways. And that's the best we can probably hope for. And in that vein, I'd like to point out at least one other aspect of this whole cycle that I'm pointing out to you. Because our health and food industry is being influenced from all kinds of sources. And among some of the chief influencers happens to actually be a religious organization. That's worth talking about. You see, because it was in 1980 that the first dietary guidelines of America were released to the public, funded by the federal government. These guidelines created something called the food pyramid. You probably remember that. You'll note on that chart that meat is near the top. It's a very small portion of it, with grains filling up the bottom part significantly. Well, why is that significant? Well, of course, it echoes Ansel Keys' research, but it also is indicative of somebody else's ideology. You see, the American Food and Dietary Guidelines were largely influenced by the Seventh-day Adventists, who advocate for a vegetarian diet. So it wasn't just that the idea that meat might be contributing to heart disease, it was that this religious organization thinks that eating meat is bad on a moral level and therefore should be restricted or reduced in the American diet. Now, what's fascinating about that is over the last 40 years, and indeed over the last 80 years, we can actually track the food and health habits of Americans. And a report was released last year showing how since the 20th century, Americans have reduced eggs and meat from their diet substantially. But they have also increased other things such as plant-based products and plant-based proteins significantly during that same time period. And yet, America's health is far worse than it was back in the 1950s. So now at least we can definitively say that the research was wrong. Red meat is not bad for you. And in general, eating meat is not bad for you. And that pulling out all these fats from our diets has actually done more harm. We now at least know this to be true. Yet our food industry has not changed in response to this. Why would they? The American consumer continues to buy these products that they have altered and changed. But you see, you can't simply pull something out of a product without replacing it. And what do we tend to replace our fats with? Well, we tend to use vegetable oils, seed oils, and sugar, all plant-based alternatives. And this, of course, has made the Seventh-day Adventists very happy and also very rich. You see, Seventh-day Adventists are lauded as these health gurus. They tend to live a long time. They tend to have very healthy lives compared to the average American. And it is all a lie. Yes, it's absolutely a lie. They tend to fund their own research. There's massive conflicts of interest. Many of these professionals in the Seventh-day Adventist organizations tend to have stock in or investments in different products, including supplements and books. And the Adventist church itself is heavily invested in healthcare. They have hospitals all over the world. And you see, it is all just a big scam. It's a marketing ploy. Just as an aside, as an example of how we see this across different industries. Some of you might be familiar with blue zones around the world. These are places on the earth where the greatest concentration of 100-year-olds live. But of course, blue zone is trademarked and it is marketed. It's a business. And all of its claims are a marketing ploy. We now know this to be true. All of the blue zones in the world, they're not really distinguished from other places. And the people who move there to get the health benefits of that lifestyle don't end up living longer. And it's because they're largely not living the lifestyle of the people who lived to be 100 years old. Now, whether or not eating meat or not eating meat is in fact a moral issue is another subject for somebody else to cover. Now, this issue with a religious organization influencing the American diet has a number of its own moral issues, and it also has a number of physical consequences that can't be ignored. For example, as we've moved forward into the 21st century, the old My Pyramid has now been replaced with the My Plate, and the My Plate is being taught to dietitians across the nation. And this is why I don't listen to or trust dietitians. Yes, they are health professionals. Yes, they're well educated. And yes, they have done a lot of hard, good work to try to make people's lives better. But they are educated by the same system that has produced the most unhealthy nation on the planet. So why would anyone take advice from them? I occasionally use them to support the claims in my videos, but I don't generally take advice from them myself without looking into it further for myself. Now, as you'll see on the My Plate, there is no meat listed on there. And that is because it is influenced by the Seventh-day Adventists, who want you to have a plant-based diet. Now, you can live a Seventh-day Adventist type of diet pretty easily. There's all kinds of products out there catering to vegetarians and vegans, who themselves are not necessarily aligned with the Seventh-day Adventists. And you can eat loads of cereal in the morning for your breakfast. You can eat French fries and potato chips, which have been boiled in oil, plant-based oil that has been superheated dozens and dozens and dozens of times, making the oil rancid. And you can feel good for a moment and become addicted to these things, but at least you have a plant-based diet. And you're going to experience all kinds of health problems in the long term for it. Look, we can't get around the fact that meat and eggs are the most nutritionally dense food available to anyone. And many of these alternative diets cause nutritional deficiencies. You can't get, for example, vitamins B1 and B12 from a plant-based diet. You have to supplement. You can't get all of your protein from a plant-based diet. Plants simply don't have all of the essential amino acids needed to process the protein. You're going to end up deficient. And of course, nutritional deficiencies lead to all kinds of chronic illness and make you susceptible to various disease. And in any case, why should we assume that the Seventh-day Adventists have a premium on what's healthy? They don't. We know that they don't. But just for the heck of it, let's take a look at where they come from. The Seventh-day Adventists came about in the 1800s. It's the offshoot of a failed religion that tried to predict the second coming of Jesus. It was presided over by a woman who, having suffered a severe brain injury, she was struck over the head, became epileptic, and her epileptic episodes became prophecy to their followers. These prophecies included things like a plant-based diet. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and you get people like John Kellogg. Kellogg was an Adventist researcher at one of their health institutions. He's responsible for creating Kellogg cereal, a highly processed grain that he used to keep people from experiencing sexual arousal. The man was also a child abuser, a genital mutilator, a Nazi sympathizer, and an awful person in every sense of the word. However, this generated a massive industry of cereals that have no nutritional value. They're supposed to be part of a complete breakfast, but most poor families in the United States tend to eat it as a standalone meal, and so they become nutritional deficient. Children who are subjected to this type of upbringing tend to struggle more in school. They struggle with development, mentally and physically. The common condition of failure to thrive can in large part be attributed to a lack of nutritional quality, among other probable factors, of course. Nutritional deficiencies aside, the Seventh-day Adventists have also partnered with the World Health Organization, the first religion to partner with such. The WHO has used the Adventists because of their large network of health institutions and hospitals around the world. But the World Health Organization itself has been classified as a transnational criminal organization and money laundering scheme. And even with that being the case, the Adventists don't seem to have any qualms with being aligned with such an institution. After all, this expands their reach, and they are largely a business. We might consider, of course, that religion in the United States is a trillion-dollar industry. Yes, it's an industry. And the Seventh-day Adventists are among the richest religions in the United States, and therefore among the most influential. And how do they use that influence? Well, we've seen the results. We've seen it in the My Pyramid and in My Plate. We've seen it in the condition of Americans across the country who have been subjected to the dietary guidelines propped up by the U.S. federal government in alignment with a religious organization that is operating as a business, trying to become more influential by increasing its wealth and selling its products, rather selling its ideology, its religion, pushing it on the rest of the people of the United States unwittingly. They are unaware that they are being influenced by such an organization. Now, moral issues aside, that is the summation of our medical health industry today. It's a couple of small parts of a bigger picture, but maybe that gives you some greater insight into what we're facing, what you're fighting, and what we all need to be a little more aware of to make our own lives a little more safe, secure, and healthy. Until next time.